I remember, just to kind of paint a picture for you, I remember laying in the ICU kind of one night and woke up, and I went to scratch my nose, and I was laying on my back, and I remember going to scratch my nose, and I didn't have the tricep muscle, so my hand just kind of fell on my face. And then I looked down, and my looked down at my atrophied arms and body, and I just remember how fast I went from like being this strong, athletic young man to looking down and just being kind of just a bag of bones. I mean, I was like that was very hard pill to swallow at that moment.
We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I am just going to start out. I like to start out light, but today, sometimes I don't start out light. Today, I actually have a male speaker and author that I'm going to introduce in a second, so maybe he can pipe in on this. But I have been just devastated by the loss of Stephen Boss Twitch to suicide. I think when I think about it, just with my own struggles, with my own mental health and everything I went through in the past few years, and maybe I can bring Rick in here. It's just a reminder. I mean, for me, I would watch his wife's Instagram, and I remember occasionally I would catch him on Ellen, and I would think, oh my gosh, like he's just such a bright light, and his family was so beautiful, and they're dancing, like they look so in love and so happy. And it's just a reminder that, number one, social media can be a facade, right? So that's the first point, that you never know what somebody's going through in their life, in their personal life, and don't judge social media by like what's reality, because it's just not. You put your best foot forward on social media. That's why I really try to be transparent on my own social media. But I wanted to point out, reach out to your friends, like your friends that you think might be doing the best, right? Your friends that are always laughing, your friends that you think have this great life. Check in on them. Check in on your friends. Check in on your family. The suicide rates in the United States have skyrocketed and are the highest of all time. And I can tell you that you can look at my pictures, you can hear my story, and know that I also was suicidal, and I chose to stay. And it really breaks my heart that, especially for men and in the Black community, just knowing that I've interviewed somebody that was in the Black community and talked about like being a minority and asking for help. It's just not accepted. So I'll introduce Rick Werry. Rick is an author. He is a speaker. He has the patience of a saint, because I can tell you that we had some major issues trying to record a couple weeks ago, and I for some reason couldn't get my power went out or something, and then I couldn't get my Wi-Fi to work. And he was so kind about it. So I already know that this is just the most tremendous individual. And once you hear his story, you're going to like him even more. But Rick, before we start, can you touch on what I just said? Because I think being male, especially, it's so hard for men to talk about mental health. And I always love when I have male guests coming on telling their stories.
Oh, I this is a perfect topic for me as well. I mean, I talk about it in my book, and maybe we can get into a little bit later. But I too struggled, and I don't think the answer is the same for everybody, but
Mm-hmm.
we're all a community, and anytime you can reach out and help or anything, if you like my dad, he's a farmer, right? And he drives down the road so slow, right? And when people get behind him and I'm like riding with him, I'm like, speed up, Dad. And one thing he's always told me is he's like, I'm always driving, I'm just looking out. And if I see somebody on the side of the road or if I see somebody, I'm always noticing things and that's a good lesson. Try to notice if someone looks down one day and the smallest things can spark positivity. So
Oh, I love that. What a tremendous human being your father sounds like. It's so true. We don't I think we're all so busy, and especially being the holidays. By the way, when this comes out, it won't be the holidays because I'm now pre-recording a month out. So sometimes my stories might be behind for my listeners and my audience, but the topic is always the same. And the topic is your mental health matters. If you have the best job in the world and you have more money than God and you have the nicest cars and the nicest clothes, none of that stuff matters if you don't work on your insides. So I'll get off my pedestal right now. And Rick, thank you so much for coming on and your patience for being such a patient person with my nightmare of trying to get you scheduled. Rick's book is called Red Letter Days. Rick's story is, I actually don't usually seek out guests. I mean, I do sometimes, but for some reason, I don't know how I found you, Rick, but you were on something and I reached out to you and I said, I need to have you on my podcast. I don't remember what it was. It was some post or something you posted, and I was so inspired by your story that I really felt the need to have you on. So why don't we kind of start with your background? I know you're in freezing cold Utah right now, and you made fun of me for complaining about the weather in LA.
yeah, I was born and raised in Roosevelt, Utah, on a dairy farm. I grew up loving sports. The main reason I love sports so much is because I could get out of like chores on the farm if I was busy with sports. I'm a small town, just a country boy, and I was the youngest of four kids, and just I was just a country boy. That's the best way I can explain it.
What was your sport? What was your baseball? What was your sport?
Yeah, baseball was my favorite, but I also played
Mm-hmm.
football and then a little bit of basketball also. So, and now
Okay. So you were
I enjoy it
very
even
athletic.
more coaching my kids. I was athletic, strong, and healthy, whatnot.
Okay. And so your childhood, your upbringing was living on a farm. It sounds like you have a amazing father. Pretty happy childhood.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't complain about my upbringing. If anything, I feel like sometimes I'm doing my kids a disservice, letting them watch YouTube because for me, there was always work to be done and stuff, and sometimes there's like not a lot for me to keep my kids active, and so that's what I do. I like to coach them in sports and work with them, and that's kind of like our hobbies too. We like following them around to their baseball tournaments or whatnot. So we love it.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about what your accident, if you're okay, kind of going there, and what inspired you to like share your story and write your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in Utah and in most rural areas, they do a program for young couples. It's called self-help housing, and you got to be kind of skilled and know the construction field. And I was a construction plumber at the time. My wife and I, we were kind of college sweethearts, and we got married. We had been married for a year, and we joined this program and started building our own house. And what you do is you get together with like a group of 10 other couples or families, and you actually do the work on your own house. And it's a way to build sweat equity and get into your first house affordably. And I was working one night, and you were supposed to carry on all this work and do your everyday 40-hour day job. And so we would work nights and weekends, and anytime we got a chance, we were just over here at the job site doing whatever tasks we were told. And we were working late one Sunday night. We started around like 4, and we had planned on working like the whole night. We had lights set up and everything. I was working with my friend Zach, and we were just working on his actual house, which is actually 2 doors down from my house. And I was building a wall on the floor. I was building it and getting ready to stand it up, and I shot a nail into the to to construct the wall, and I nailed that nail hit a knot in the wood, and it like ricocheted up and then shot into like the web of my thumb. So I had a nail right there sticking out of my thumb. And I was a tough guy. Again, I mentioned that I was a tough guy. So I asked my friend Zach, who I was with, to pull it out. And he did. He grabbed his Leatherman and pulled it out. And it didn't, I mean, it hurt a little bit, but I was just trying to act tough. And as I was looking down at that nail, I started to get lightheaded. And it's weird because I had mentioned I grew up on a dairy farm. And so we had our share of it, of blood and guts. And, I felt like I was pretty, I've doctored cows, and felt like I
Yeah.
wasn't, blood never scared me until this day or whatever. I was looking down at my own thumb and a little hole in my thumb, and it got made me lightheaded. And so I started walking across the floor to get a drink, and I thought that would solve the issue. And as I was walking, I passed out. And earlier that day, we had cut the hole out of the floor where the stairs go, and we hadn't built the stairs yet. And so as I was walking across, I tipped over and fell uh, into that hole that was in the floor and fell directly into the basement. I landed on the top of my head right here at about C6, C7 vertebrae, and broke my neck right about there. And was laying in the basement, scared. I didn't know what to do or say, and my friend Zach called the ambulance. The ambulance came. I was laying in the basement, and this is in March in Utah, and so there was a little bit of ice in it had snowed the day before. We had shoveled as much snow, but it melted and then frozen, and so I was in like a layer of ice about that thick, just laying there, and I caught pneumonia even laying in there, and that would later be kind of the thing that just about killed me. But I got ambulance to the Richfield Hospital, and then they life flighted me to Provo, Utah Hospital. The helicopter touched off at 11 o'clock, and here's a kind of crazy thing. The next hour at midnight would be the next day, March 10th, and that would have been my 1 year anniversary with my wife.
Oh. So tell me, I'm so sorry. Like, what a scary thing to happen, and just how quickly it can happen. How quickly your life can change in a blink of an eye. Were you awake during that whole experience? Like you hit your head and didn't pass out? You knew what was going on, or?
So I was, my friend Zach woke me up down in the basement and explained to me what had happened. And um, uh, he explained to me, and I was awake from then on. I was awake in the ambulance. I remember telling Zach that I couldn't feel my legs, and I remember it's kind of weird. I didn't really even think about my hands or my arms um, until I remember I was in the ICU and I had caught pneumonia, I mentioned. And so, with newly paralyzed lungs, pneumonia was the thing that just about killed me. So, what they did is they put me on a tracheotomy where you breathe through right here and they bypass your mouth and throat. And so you can't speak. Um, I was on a medically induced coma to where uh, they wanted to keep me stable because of they wanted to protect the spine. They didn't want me moving around. So they would basically keep me in a coma and I'd wake up for short periods of time. And once I started moving around enough, they just drug me enough to keep me back asleep and stable. Um, but eventually
How, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say,
But
how long were you in the coma? How long were you how long were you hospitalized? I mean, that's terrifying.
So I was in the ICU for about 2 weeks, and then
Hmm.
so I was in the coma for I think a week. That's just guessing. I don't remember the details. And then they moved me from the ICU to a neuro rehab unit, and that's where the PTs and OTs would come in and work with you every day and rehab you basically to try to get you to be able to be the most independent as possible. That's their goal, to get you back into life and living in your house and stuff. I remember, just to kind of paint a picture for you, I remember laying in the ICU kind of one night and woke up and I went to scratch my nose and I was laying on my back and I remember going to scratch my nose and I didn't have the tricep muscle, so my hand just kind of fell on my face. And then I looked down at my atrophied arms and body, and I just remember how fast I went from like being this strong, athletic young man to looking down and just being kind of just a bag of bones. I mean, I was like that was very hard pill to swallow at that moment.
Yeah, and tell me what that feeling is like, because really, there's nothing. I can't imagine the feeling of just being like, I can't use my legs anymore. I can't. My life is completely changed. Right? I no longer am the person I once was physically on the outside. I'm gonna have to relearn the whole process of living and being a whole new person. Really, what I can only imagine what that would feel like, and the pain and the anger and all the stages that you probably went through. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I remember just the smallest of tasks would become so frustrating. When I was on my trach, uh, my wife, it was back when we had flip phones. She needed to check my voicemail on my phone. And so she had to type in the 4 digits. And so I was unable to speak, unable to hold up a digit on my hand because my hands were paralyzed. And we got so frustrated because she was the only way that I could relay that message was for her to read my lips. And we'd get the wrong number and I'd get frustrated and no, that's not, and we have to start over, whatnot. Just the smallest of things were just became so challenging and hard. And I remember too, when I was in the rehab unit, my sleep was just all over the place. I'd sleep all day and then I'd be like wide awake at night and I just couldn't figure out a sleeping schedule. And so most of the time I'd have family around me during the day, especially my wife. Um, but at nights I was like alone to my thoughts and alone. And man, that was where this like dark cloud of just, I guess, just depression and just like, why, why did you take this away from me? And what was really
Yeah.
interesting,
This
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say the piece of it of the why, right? In life, or if you're spiritual, why me? Why now? All of those questions. Are you spiritual?
Yeah, I tried to stay spiritual pretty much the
Hmm.
most of the time. Um, and
But you probably had a hard time with that, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just I think I think God puts people into our places at certain times when we need it. Um, for me, it was I was in rehab and wide awake one night, nobody around, and I had a nurse come in to my room, and she was a older lady, kind of a hard nosed nurse. I could tell she'd been around for a while, and she brought in to me a calendar and a red marker, and she said to me, anytime she says, stop feeling sorry for yourself and take a fresh start from today, and just say today's your new life, and anytime you can do something today that you couldn't do yesterday, we're going to write it down and celebrate it. And we would have the weirdest accomplishments and the weirdest celebrations. And I think they were low on census at the time too, so they had like a lot of time to spend on me. And so we'd write these things down in this calendar that were silly, and it was just kind of at the time it was something to keep us busy, but we would write down in this calendar like today Rick wheeled down the hall without help, 50 yards. And I remember even we had the whole staff. There was a lady named Jenny May, and she was working somewhere else. She took a job, and so we were kind of celebrating her. And so we held a 1K, and we all walked 1K for Jenny May. And anyways, those were things that kept my mind off of the here and now, the situation. Um, but then I went home. I came home to my new house, and time moves on, right? And the newness of my injury, the newness of people coming around and visiting Rick had kind of worn off, and uh, I spent a lot of time alone by myself. And this is kind of interesting how timing wise we were talking about Twitch and whatnot, and maybe this is the reason why. But this was where that dark cloud came back to me, and I wanted to end my life. um, I, I would remember thinking how crazy it was that I would just all of a sudden be coming up with ideas, and with my hands paralyzed, I remember thinking how pathetic it was that I I was just trying to come up with an idea, and the only idea that I could figure out that would be the best situation is I wanted to push my wheelchair into a canal, and in my neighborhood there's a canal that runs across my neighborhood and through my neighborhood, and but I knew that there was a problem with that. I knew that I didn't think I could will myself to that canal, and there was a little hill to get up to that canal, and I didn't think I could do that. Um, so what I did is I started like that was my new goal, was to will myself a little bit further every day, um, so that eventually I could get up that hill and do the deed. And so I'd just go like a little bit further in increments. And one day I went uh, to the bottom of the hill and like made it a little bit up, and I thought, next trip I can do this. And so finally I rested a couple days, and then I thought about it, and this was my day, so I was gonna say goodbye to my wife, and said goodbye and wheeled all the way down the street, got to the bottom of this hill, and I looked at it as a challenge, and I got myself up to this hill, and got up to the top of the hill. When I'm sitting at the top of the hill, I was thinking to myself that I had like set a goal and accomplished it. And kind of interesting enough, the voice of that nurse and her words was like, accomplish something today that you couldn't do yesterday. And I thought to myself that I had just done that. I had accomplished something that I couldn't do. And physically, not just mentally, I physically did something that I couldn't do. And I talk about, when I motivational speak, I talk about how I lived two different lives. My life before my accident, where I was strong and I solved all my problems with just sheer strength. And then my life after my accident. And my second life didn't start when I broke my neck. My second life started that day. So
Yeah.
to finish the story, I didn't push myself in the canal. I wheeled myself around the entire block that day, and I was proud of myself. And that was the answer for me. I'm not saying it's the answer for anybody else, but that day I survived that day, and then I thought more about that concept of do something today that you couldn't do yesterday.
Okay, well, I'm now crying. So, um, that's a beautiful story. Like it really honestly is. And I think unless you've been in the amount of pain that you have, or you can understand what it's like to be a prisoner in your own mind, because that's what I think of when I think of, I'll talk about my own experience with wanting to leave, and and to have a moment that's a gift in so many ways, where you're like, no, I'm not going out this way. I'm not going out this way. And your story is, really hard to hear. It really
Right.
is. But I think it's a testament to a human being's ability to overcome really anything. We never know how long we're on this planet. We're a decade now, to me, seems like it goes by in a flash, and so no matter what our things that we have to go through in life, there's always a way to stay. There's always a reason to stay. And your story really is the purpose why I think that you stopped yourself, and then you wrote the book, and then you're here to share, to help other people, right? I hope that you see
Yeah.
it that way, because I do. And you really just touched me, like my heart right now, because I really needed to hear that. And I think that a lot of my listeners, and sorry, because I cry I just surpassed my 100th episode. I think out of my 100 episodes, I probably cried on like 90 of them. So I'm a
Okay.
crier, but I also think it's just a story of the like a human's ability to be so resilient and overcome really anything. So, and I love that your nurse like was kind of like, I love hearing that there's people like that, like, kind of like, get up, like, this isn't done for you. You keep going, like,
Right.
stop being in like such self-pity. And sometimes we need to hear that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like,
Yeah.
I got an analogy for you, Megan. I like to hand cycle. I ride this hand cycle, and I go quite often, ride around like the neighborhood and stuff. And my favorite distance is to go about 15 miles. And if I go 15 miles, there's this spot in the town across from me. it's this hill, right? And it's crazy because this hill is in Elsinore, Utah. If you're ever there, you recognize. But there's a bike path, and what's interesting is to the right of you is like the freeway, and to the left of you is another hill, and you're you're going up this steep incline, and you're kind of tunneled in, and you can't. All you see is the top of the hill, and I'm a proponent of fitness and kicking your own butt, and I always question my sanity when I'm riding up this hill, and just like I feel like I'm like all I'm doing is just suffering, and
Uh-huh.
I feel like in life, here's your analogy. I feel like a lot of times we are the same way. We just feel like we're tunneled in by our problems, and eventually you get to the top of the hill, and it's what's interesting about this particular path is once you get to the top of the hill, you become, this isn't a word, but you become untunnelized, and you can see like the whole picture. You can see the whole valley, and you can look back at the hill and you realize that you suffered for a reason. You didn't just, it wasn't just torture. You now get to go down the other side, and like you get to enjoy your suffering, and
Yeah.
Megan, don't tell my mom or my wife, but I can get like 30 miles an hour going down the other side, and like it is worth
They
it,
better listen, and then they'll know. Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah. I
love
mean, it
that.
it
I
feels
love
like
that. I
it's a
think so
rush,
many people, yeah, people need to hear this. People need to hear your story. Tell me, once you got to the point of making the decision to stay, right? What, how did your life turn around? Were you that moment, those seconds? I know for me, it just kind of hit me one day. And I hate to use my own story, but I can relate in different ways to the moment for me when I was sitting on the beach, and I talk about how I was done. I was done. I was like, I had a plan. I knew how I was gonna go. I had obsessed about it for 6 months. Um, and then I looked at my kids. That was the time when that day I looked at my kids, and I just kind of was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But then something inside of me was like, I'm not going out this way. I can't leave my daughter, my older one, especially, and my younger one, but something about my older one, because I had lost my dad as a little girl. And I just thought, I was like, I don't want her to grow up without me. Like, I have work to do. And then I realized my purpose, which is kind of to tell my story so more and more people like you and I kind of like, I kind of compare it to like building a fire, right? And we're like rubbing the two sticks together, and then there's a spark, and then you share your story, and then more people hear your story and they go, you know what, Rick, it's okay. Like, I can relate. Maybe it's not the pain that you went through in your accident, but I can relate to you in a different way. And that's the purpose in so many ways.
yeah. Um, I I uh I got another analogy for you. I'm a
Okay, I love
storyteller, so
analogies, please.
okay, so
That's okay. I love
so
it.
like so I was listening to this podcaster the other day, and he was talking about the video game Mario, and
Hmm.
immediately, like that was my generation, like growing up. Like you could see Mario drop in, do 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 do, and he'd go and he'd hit like the one up, and he'd get, and then you'd die eventually, like your character would die, right? And what was crazy is this podcaster was like, if the game Mario were just like uh, a green grass path, and all you did is you dropped in and you went across and you went to the end, right? No challenges. He said you probably like put that game down after like one try. I mean, it'd be boring. And it says the reason we loved Mario when we were kids is because we couldn't. We died, but we wanted to get to that position and just a little bit further every time. You know, you'd get to that fire breathing dragon and he'd kill you this time. He'd be like, I'm gonna get a little bit farther. You know, and I think if we like the thing we need to like tell our kids, our like people, my message is everybody's going to have challenges in life. There's no life that is gifted with challenge free. You know, my challenge is, you know, I still even have challenges today. You know, but the thing is like I feel like um, if we can look at like our trials and whatnot as just like a challenge, how am I going to get past this and a little bit further? And I think together we can work on those challenges and help other people, you know. And I I think, you know, Megan, it's pretty cool that you have a podcast and you know, like you have something that sets you apart from everybody else. You know, you have these gifts, you know, to help you through, right? And I thought I lost everything when I became paralyzed. Thought I would, you know, I thought, oh, my talent is gone. I don't have this physical body, but I realized that God blessed me with the ability to tell a good story and to motivate others. And you know, like we all have that. Everybody on this earth has certain talents, skills, abilities, and traits, and that's what helps us get through.
Oh, this is a heavy day. Can you tell me what, like, how you got to the point where, I mean, you obviously were with your wife for a year when it happened. It must have been hard on a relationship because you were dealing with all the things that you were dealing with, but then you went on to have a family, correct?
Yeah, yep. My wife is she deserves more credit than I do as far as my survival story. I mean, she was there with me the whole time. She actually became a nurse after I, you know, because she saw what good nurses do and what bad nurses do.
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time in the hospital, um, and my wife has been with me through the whole thing, you know, and truly a blessing to me. Um, I couldn't make it a day without her now, even.
You have the most beautiful family. Um, and I love that you've kind of gone on and written your book and, you know, you're a coach. And what else do you do now? I mean, also what you do, the hand cycle. So you like aren't somebody obviously that just, you know, is like, this is my life now. I'm not going to be active. Tell me about that.
Um, I like to be active, you know, and I think
Hmm.
everybody has this desire within them, but I have these moments where I can't sleep at night, you know. I think everybody does, and one half of those nights are like the excited, like, oh, you know, Christmas is coming, and I can't sleep because I'm excited to open the presents, right? But the other half of those nights are just nights where I kind of like lay awake and I try to think of like what's my next move, you know, and I have this big desire to make my mama proud, you know, and that's not just my mama, but like that's my term for like I want to do something that will make people proud of me or whatnot. And so I've been blessed in my life with just people around me who are willing to adapt with me, you know, because I the reality of it is I'm in a wheelchair and you know I can do everything I need to, but sometimes I'm going to need help and and people have been placed around me and I've had opportunities to go do things, and my philosophy is just never say no to those things. Um, like I said, I ride a hand cycle. One of my favorite things to do is I play a sport called wheelchair rugby, and I play with a team out of Las Vegas, um, and it's pretty cool. That's like my favorite thing to talk about is rugby. If you have like a conversation, if you meet me, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I play wheelchair rugby." That's my biggest thing I like to brag about. A lot of my teammates are
That's pretty
people who,
cool.
yeah, um, the sport is basically for anybody in a wheelchair. Not anybody that's a quadriplegic have to have impairment in all four limbs, and it's really cool. It's like my way of getting around people who uh, have dealt with the same kind of issues that I have, and 5 or 6 guys that I get with down in Vegas. Um, they're my best friends and my brothers or whatnot. So
I love that you do that. I also um that I think that's so great to be able to be around people that maybe can relate to the things that you've gone through in your own life. And I've never heard of that. I think that's so inspiring. Do you gamble when you're in Vegas at your tournaments? I just have to ask you that.
I'm not a very good gambler. I used to a little bit, but most of the tournaments that we go to, uh, well, we're so busy with like getting going from bus to gym to hotel. I don't really gamble very much, but uh, what's really cool is when I was a kid, I had fond memories of following my dad to like softball tournaments that he would go, and I loved that. I looked up to my dad a lot, and my kids are 9 now, and a couple of my favorite tournaments that I've been to has been where I've gotten the opportunity to bring my kids along and let them watch what I do. The sport of rugby, when they invented it, it was called murder ball. So if anybody wants to learn about the sport, there's actually a documentary called Murder Ball, and it's about like the Team USA when they became when they were in the Olympics, and it's an Olympic sport. And I've played around Paralympians, and it's pretty cool. Like it's my way of I get to travel the U.S. I've been as far as Texas, California, all over Arizona, Utah, Idaho for tournaments, and it's my favorite thing to do right now.
I love that. I think that's amazing. Something that I wanted to touch on that you said before I asked the dumb do you like to gamble question, only because it was me selfishly putting myself in Vegas. I'm such a weirdo. Anytime I meet anybody from Vegas, I think it's amazing because I love a slot machine. So I'm anytime Vegas is mentioned, I'm like one day going to be one of those old ladies sitting at a slot machine with like a long ash. Even though I don't smoke, maybe when I'm old I'll start. That's a joke. I I think something you said was when you're sleeping, because you obviously have this amazing mind, which is such a gift, right? To be able to tap into like thoughts. But then sometimes when you're somebody that is a storyteller or your brain never stops, like at night I'm up a lot. My mind is always racing. I can never sit still. That's just how I'm wired. Um, but I think it's important for people to listen and know when you are a survivor or somebody that has struggled with, like in your case, your story and struggled with your mental health, that you do still have bad days. I mean, not every day is going to be a good day. And to understand that, yes, you didn't, push yourself down that hill and decide to leave. But what you are honest and transparent about is the fact that there's still hard days. We still struggle. You're still going to have like days where, it's not easy, but you choose to keep going. And I think that's important to point out. And then find like outlets. Like, I love that you have the rugby. I love that you coach sports. Your kids are so lucky to have you. Are they twins?
Yes, they're twins. They're
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Grayson and Berkeley are their names.
They're
And
so cute.
oh, they are.
I love those names, by the way.
Yeah. I got a story about Grayson if you want.
Okay, tell me your story.
So, this is another lesson too. Okay, so I remember when my kids were still in the cribs, but they'd want to come out, and they'd want, they'd cry at nights and whatnot. And my wife had started working nights full time, and it was my job as a dad to, take care of them if they woke up in the night or they needed anything. And Berkeley, the smaller one, he was always in a crib that we had modified, and we could open the door and I could like wheel up to him. But we didn't have time to modify Grayson's crib. And Grayson has always been the stronger, the tougher one, and cried less and whatnot. But one night Grayson was crying in his crib, and up to this point I just never could get him out of the crib by myself. And this night he wanted the same thing I wanted. He wanted to be on his dad's lap, and it was a lesson to me because I was like, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And I remember wheeling my wheelchair as close as I could to the crib. And as a little kid, he can't talk yet, but I remember speaking to him. I said, Grayson, we've got to work together to get you on my lap. And so I maneuvered and tried to reach my arm over into this crib. And if you could imagine this toddler, just like almost like a little monkey clinging onto his mom's back, he clinged onto my arm, and then I like leveraged on my wheelchair, and I was able to reach him over the crib. Probably not the safest, but onto my lap. And my kids, they're going to realize a lot of things in this life that, yeah, my dad's different. There's some things that dad can't, do right away. But with adaption and help, like I've never in my parenting whatever, my parenting life had been inadequate. Like whatever I can do works fine for us, and as a matter of fact, I feel like I'm more active than most with my kids, and I think that I was worried about that, like if my kids would look at me differently. But I was pretty proud of, like about a month ago, they were talking about heroes in their classes at school, and both my kids brought up me, and the teacher was like, we'd like you to come speak to the whole school. And so I was like pretty proud of that, and that's kind of one thing that really got me interested in motivational speaking. And I feel like my story has an opportunity to inspire others.
It does, 100%. I mean, I've been doing this now a few years, and the story that you shared today is just one of hope, like what you went through in your life is a form of grieving. You had to grieve your old life and start fresh and new. And no matter who you are, this is for the listeners, no matter what your struggles are, whether you are going through some kind of loss of another person, or you're going through your own loss of having to start over like Rick, these stories and your story is one that's a gift that you're supposed to be sharing, and people need to hear this. So I don't know if me telling you that makes more people want to hear your story, or not. That's such a silly thing to say. More people should be hearing your story is what I meant to say. And so you got to keep going. You have to keep going because it's a great story. It really is. I could talk to you for a very long time, by the way. And you're my friend now because a lot of times well, you and I already, I feel like are friends because we've been in contact for so many months.
Yeah.
But the book, Red Letter Days, which you sent me, we're going to be sending a couple to some listeners, right?
Yeah.
Did you tell me you wanted to do that? Okay. What is your Instagram?
My Instagram is Rick from Roe, RickFromRoe. And if you just search Rick Werry, you can find that. And you're there's a link on my bio if you're interested in buying my book. Or if you ever need a motivational speaker. I'm new to that game, but I really want to just get my message out there.
And you will. You don't. You. It's supposed to happen, and it will. I'm willing it for you. I'm actually doing I'm starting my speaking career as well, and I think we're supposed to talk offline about maybe connecting you with someone. So, Rick, it was an honor to finally have you on. I loved every second of this episode. I guarantee my listeners, I'm pretty sure, will too. And you please keep going and sharing your story. And thank you for making me cry. I am so grateful that you came on today. Please follow Rick. Go to his Instagram, get his book. And just a reminder to all of you, keep going. This world is not always easy. We're in a really tough place in our country, in our world. A lot of people are struggling, especially this time of year. It's hard at the holidays, even though by the time this plays, it won't be the holidays, but it's still hard. And I just always remind people that they matter and to keep going. And in closing, be happy by making other people happy. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. It was worth the wait. I appreciate it, Megan.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.